Good morning, everybody. Thank you for coming. We appreciate your attendance. I must admit before we begin that I have no engineering experience, no construction experience, no financial acumen, and I am certainly not here to lend diversity to the board. So why am I here? I am here because I have, in a long career of public and private service, come to recognize that there are certain projects that are critical and that are vital, not just to the state, not just to the region, but to the entire nation. The Gateway project is such a project, and I think everybody knows that. The importance of Gateway as a vital link in the Northeast, a link through which over 10% of goods and people flow that affect the GDP of this country is hard to overstate. And so this process is one that is about as important as we have been involved with thus far. The ability to get the benefit of the wisdom and the knowledge of people such as yourselves is what it is going to take to make this a reality. I can say on behalf of the Gateway Development Board of Trustees that all the trustees and all of the partners are committed to this project. This project will go forward and it will succeed because it has to succeed. And so the real key now is getting the kind of industry help that you all offer. And so I am grateful for the level of attendance today. I think I speak on behalf of everybody involved with GDC that your presence and your participation is now vital to this going forward. We've got a full day ahead of us with people who have actual knowledge and actual experience, unlike myself. All I can really offer is my positive disposition and optimism in the face of adversity. So it is now my pleasure to introduce our interim director, the real leader of the project, John Porcari.
Thanks, Steve. And Mr. Chairman, we appreciate everything that you're doing for Gateway Development Corporation. Good morning, everyone. I'm John Porcari, Interim Executive Director of Gateway, and we have a series of presentations for you this morning. I'm going to start with a project overview, followed by Phil Rice with a technical description of the 30% design of the tunnel, and that is followed by Frank Saker, the Finance Director, on the finance aspects of it. We'll have an opportunity for Q&A as part of this as well. I'd be remiss if I didn't first thank the Port Authority for hosting this and being one of the driving forces behind the Gateway project in general. So my thanks to William Blaventhal and Ben Engel and everyone else on Rick Cotton's team involved in this. So, first, an overview of the project. While today's RFI session is focused on the tunnel, I wanted to provide first a quick overview of what we call Phase 1 of the Gateway project. Phase 1 consists of the Portal North Bridge, the Hudson Tunnel Project, and the Hudson Tunnel Project is the Hudson Tunnel itself, the rehabilitation of the existing tunnels, and the third and final piece of the Hudson Yards concrete casing. There's a lot of other pieces to follow, but Phase 1 essentially eliminates the single points of failure for 10% of America's gross domestic product. The Portal North Bridge project, first just a quick status update on that. It's a design bid build project. It's 100% designed, it's 100% permitted. If you go past there now, you'll see that there's early work that's separately funded underway to prepare for the main construction part. The local funding component for the Portal North Bridge is through the state of New Jersey and its New Jersey Economic Development Authority. The local funding is committed, approved, and 100% in place. It's a bit of a misnomer to call it a bridge. It's actually a 2.3-mile project that includes the bridge and approaches on both sides, but on a separate track, as it were, from the Hudson Tunnel Project. The Portal North Bridge project is ready to go to construction right now. And I do think it's worth pointing out that given the work that's taking place out there, other bids on similar projects in rolling stock and other things, we have a high degree of confidence in the bridge construction numbers. So think of that literally as a parallel project to the tunnel project that we're focused on today. The Hudson Tunnel Project, as I mentioned, is the 2 new tubes under the Hudson. It's the last piece of the Hudson Yard concrete casing, basically from 11th Avenue West to connect to the tunnel, and it's the rehabilitation sequentially of the 2 tubes of the existing 107-year-old tunnel. For anyone who is not familiar with it, the existing tunnel was inundated during Hurricane Sandy with salt water. That has caused permanent damage to the existing tunnel. It's accelerated the need for a replacement tunnel. And unlike virtually any other transportation facility in or out of the metro area, there is no alternative passenger rail route. There's no other bridge, no other tunnel for passenger rail. So we have a clock ticking on the replacement of this tunnel, and we have truly a single point of failure. The new tunnel, and as Phil gets into the details, he'll go through it, is a more reliable, a more resilient, and a operationally much more flexible replacement facility. It'll provide redundancy and resiliency for both Amtrak and New Jersey Transit. In terms of volume, we're talking about 450 trains a day and 200,000 passengers. The reason that the new tunnel has to be built before we can rehabilitate the old tunnel is fairly straightforward. If we have to take the existing tubes of the new tunnel out of service one at a time, we lose 75% of the capacity. We will go from 24 trains an hour to 6 trains per hour because the remaining tube will have to have travel in both directions. That would be nothing short of catastrophic in terms of its impact on the local economy. Just a little bit on the deterioration itself, chlorides and other components in the salt water that inundated the tunnel, as you can see from that bench wall photo, have accelerated the decline of the tunnel. The engineering work that was done post-Sandy to determine the lifespan short of renovation made it clear that the deterioration accelerated with Sandy. Another shot of some of the deterioration. I would, without putting too fine a point on it, I will tell you at the time when the tunnels flooded, we were confronted with the open question of whether the tunnels would reopen at all. And that was actually an open question for a fair period of time. When they did reopen and the systems were restored in relatively short order, it was clear that the clock had started on replacement. On the tunnel project itself, first in terms of approvals and entitlements, the EIS was completed in less than 22 months. If you're familiar with a major EIS project for a project like this, that's near record time. And I think a national model of concurrent review, cooperating federal agencies, and getting a good EIS product done. It's under review by USDOT at this point and has been since February of 2018. A record of decision is the remaining action on that NEPA approval. So we look forward to that record of decision. Technical activities that Phil's going to walk you through over the past 6 months. The design is now at the 30% level. That 30% design has been submitted to the Federal Railroad Administration for review. As you all are well aware, 30% design is the typical jumping off point for consideration of alternative delivery mechanisms. And the design for the last piece of the concrete casing, tunnel box number 3, is completed as well. We are also out on the street with a solicitation for a financial advisor for the tunnel. We expect to conclude that procurement process fairly shortly. On the financial plan for the tunnel, and Frank Saker will get into this in more detail, the project partners have reaffirmed their funding commitment to it. We have 2 states and 3 entities, New York, New Jersey Transit, the Port Authority, and Amtrak, that are all financially committed to this project. It's been an extraordinary effort on the local funding side. And at the risk of stating the obvious, this is a project of national significance, not even regional significance. And so we're working with our federal partners on the federal component of the funding plan as well. Most recently, the Port Authority has agreed to perform the grant applicant and project sponsor role. As a bi-state agency with a long and successful history of delivering and maintaining projects, the Port Authority is the ideal project sponsor for that. At the same time, we're simultaneously pursuing legislation on a bi-state basis in both Trenton and Albany that will designate the Gateway Development Corporation as a grant applicant and NEPA project sponsor. Just a little bit on the concrete casing. The first 2 phases of that were built basically to 11th Avenue, connecting 11th Avenue and the existing Penn Station through Hurricane Sandy reconstruction funds. The portion that's remaining is outlined in yellow there. It will basically go west from 11th Avenue and connect to the eastern terminus of the tunnel. The completion of that, again, it's designed and it's ready to go. We are moving forward with the first early construction work by moving what's currently an emergency services building that's over the top of that alignment. It's a Long Island Railroad facility and associated utilities. We are moving that now. That is a project that is going out to bid and is 100% funded, co-funded by Amtrak and the Port Authority. So with the completion of that 3rd piece of the tunnel box, we'll have the complete alignment ready for the new tunnel. And as I mentioned, the 1st and 2nd phases are already completed. If you're familiar with Hudson Yards, where the buildings are now is underneath that is the 1st and 2nd phase of the tunnel box, and it's ready for a connection. And that's the emergency services building that's being relocated. We expect award of the construction contract for the utility relocation and the building relocation in the fall of this year. Just as with the early construction work on the Portal North Bridge, it's a way to clear the decks for the main construction component. So there's been a lot of activity behind the scenes in preparing the tunnel for construction. Our next part of this you're participating in today, which is a request for information process that'll help determine the procurement process going forward. And Now that we have 30% design in hand and are waiting a record of decision, this is the point at which, from a procurement point of view, we need to make some decisions on how we're going to deliver the project, including the full array of alternative delivery. And so that's the brief overview. We're going to have a technical presentation in a moment, but we do have an opportunity for some questions on this if any of you have any questions. I should also note that there will be an opportunity to follow up in writing, and we will be posting on the Gateway website any questions and answers that are of use. So, questions?
Please, hi.
Will the PowerPoint presentation be available?
Yes, so actually you took the words out of my mouth. The question is, will the PowerPoint be available afterwards? Short answer is yes. So I saw a lot of folks writing away vociferously, so I wanted to give an early heads up that there will be the slides to be posted after the presentation. Any other questions? Initial questions? We will have a technical presentation, commercial presentation. Yes, please. If you can just wait for the microphone. Yeah, sorry.
Less a technical question, but will there be an attendee list posted as well for this event, or?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right.
Why not?
Why not? It will be long. Any other initial questions?
Great. Thank you all. So with that, let me introduce my colleague Phil Rice to walk you through the technical presentation of the 30% design of the tunnel.
Thanks, John. Okay, I'm going to take you through an engineering overview of the Hudson Tunnel Project. This is based on the completion of our 30% design, preliminary engineering design, in support of the NEPA process, which John mentioned in his presentation. So again, what we're trying to do here is to preserve the current functionality of the existing Amtrak and New Jersey Transit rail services by ultimately repairing the existing tunnels, which are referred to as the North River tunnels. And we're doing this by first building 2 new tunnels, the Hudson tunnels, Hudson River tunnels. And once those are completed and operational, we'll be able to go in and fully rehabilitate the existing tunnels, and that way we ultimately will end up with 4 tunnels, which will provide redundant capability and flexibility and resiliency to guarantee that service will be maintained for the generations to come. But this all has to be done while maintaining uninterrupted service, as John mentioned in his presentation. Closing one of the existing tunnels at a time to do that rehabilitation without new tunnels would just be such a tremendous disruption to the existing capacity. It's just not going to work for the region. So as you all know, the Superstorm Sandy back in 2012 resulted in roughly a 4-day closure. The existing tunnels were flooded. The East River tunnels were flooded. Substations were inundated. And there was ongoing damage to internal systems in the tunnel. John mentioned salt water, not good for this type of facility. The rehabilitation of the existing tunnels is estimated to take about 2 years per tube. And as we said, that would happen after the new tunnels are built, brought online, and commissioned. So this is an overview of our alignment. I did want to spend just a couple moments here explaining what the difference is between this project and the Access to the Region Core project. Many of you in this room had some very big involvement on that job. We are different. This is not, as conceived, this phase of the work, a capacity expansion project, unlike ARC, which was. You can see the ARC alignment there went all the way into Manhattan and underneath 34th Street, where it connected with a new station cavern. That's in front of Macy's. We don't have this in this job. In this job, we're going into Penn Station. On the New Jersey side, the far western end, there is no loop track in this project, and there's no storage facility. So this is our alignment here, extending from County Road in Secaucus, running through the Palisades, into the north end of Hoboken, under the Hudson River, and ending up at Penn Station, existing Penn Station. And you can see how the alignment varies from the existing alignment in white at the top there. So looking at it in profile, we go underground in North Bergen, pass through the rock mass of the Palisades, meet the Hoboken shaft at the very northern limit of Hoboken. Then we're under the New Jersey waterfront, head out underneath the Hudson River, and then come into Manhattan just between the Bulkhead and 12th Avenue. And we make our way over to what's referred to as A Yard. It's the feeder yard into Penn Station, just on the east side of 10th Avenue. And again, looking at the difference between this alignment and the ARC project alignment, because we're going into Penn Station, we're coming into Manhattan at a much higher level. The ARC project was working its way over to a cavern under 34th Street, hence the profile was much deeper at the east end. So I want to take you through the project, what it consists of. Starting in the west, we diverge from the existing northeast corridor at County Road in Secaucus, and we have about 4,000 feet plus of the new tracks running on fill behind retaining walls to minimize the right-of-way that's needed. We then we do have a short bridge over Secaucus Road, and then we pass through what's largely the undeveloped part of the Meadowlands on a viaduct. We cross over two existing freight rail tracks owned by Conrail and New York, Susquehanna, and Western. That's shown in orange there. And then we have a transition section where we get down the grade, and then we'll pass underneath Tonnelle Avenue before reaching our approach to the Palisades Tunnel portal in North Bergen. Tire length here about 1.6 miles. This is a blow-up here showing Tonnelle Avenue. So we're creating an underpass here. This was actually work that had started during the ARC project, and some of the construction was completed to turn this into an overpass, and then the project stopped in the fall of 2010, and it's covered up. So we're going to go back and redo it this time. There are two big areas, one to the west, where you can see all the buses are parked. That's an area available for staging, which is already owned by New Jersey Transit. And then there's also another section of property on the east side of Tonnelle also will be available for construction staging. So heading eastward from the overpass that we're creating at Tonnelle, we have a 300-foot or so approach to our Palisades Tunnel portal. We go through the Palisades in twin tunnels, assumed to be done with tunnel boring machine, and essentially most of the way a rock job. And we're pretty deep here, going under Union City. The cover reaches as much as 250 feet. The tunnel length shown in green here between the Palisades portal and the Hoboken shaft, almost exactly a mile, and we have 6 cross passages that will be included. A word about the bored tunnel cross section. Our team has been through an analysis to see what's the minimum diameter that we need to fit the trains in, considering the dynamic envelope. We have the systems. We've got the overhead catenary, signaling, emergency systems. We have a high bench, which is set at the height of the threshold of the train car doors. and which would be the evacuation route if people have to come off the trains in an emergency. And then we have a low bench on the opposite side, which provides access to railroad operations personnel in case there's a mechanical problem with the train stalled in the tunnel. And also for emergency responders, it's an alternative access. This is something that's not available with the existing North River tunnels, which have a high bench on both sides, set at a height that's actually above the threshold height of the doors. So this is an improvement. We also have space for a tunnel ventilation duct, and that's part of our ventilation system design, which consists of 3 fan plants and a tunnel duct extraction system, which is the design for this has been developed in accordance with the National Fire Protection Association Standard 130, well known in the industry, and Amtrak's Engineering Practice Standard EP 4006. And in order to meet the requirement that this tunnel has to provide equivalent capacity, equivalent level of service to the existing tunnels, it has to accommodate 24 trains per hour. And with the industry practice standard of limiting 1 train per vent zone, in order to do that and meet the required capacity, we have to divide the tunnel into 6 subzones, which vary in length from 3,900 feet down to 1,200 feet. And so at the fan plants, we have, for an emergency condition in which a train would be stopped and it could be stopped in the tunnel and on fire, no matter which zone it's in, we have the ability to extract the smoke and move it in a direction away from evacuating passengers to provide a tenable environment for people who have to leave. We do that with high-pressure fans at the Hoboken plant and the 12th Avenue plant to pull smoke out. And then we have low-pressure fans, which are reversible, that either can supply air or exhaust air into the main area of the tunnel. So the train wave fans that you see there are actually housed in the ventilation plants. They're not underneath the tunnel as the schematic might suggest. All the fans are in the plants. Okay, just continuing on with our alignment. Coming to the end of the Palisades Tunnel, we have our Hoboken fan plant shaft. At the very northern limit of Hoboken, in fact, on the north side of 18th Street there is Weehawken. So we're right at the boundary between the 2 communities. The shaft is about 125 feet in diameter. Depth, excavation depth, about 110 feet, partially in soil, partially in rock. We have this staging area that is owned by New Jersey Transit now. They bought it during the ARC project, approximately 2 acres in size. Our tunnels continue with what we refer to as the Hudson River Tunnel segment, heading out east from the shaft in mixed face conditions. And then when we get underneath Willow Avenue and Park Avenue, we go into full face rock. The entire length of the tunnel from the Hoboken shaft to the Manhattan shaft at 12th Avenue, 1.4 miles, about 7,400 feet. So you have mixed face, you've got rock, there's about 2,000 feet of full face rock, sandstone, and then the rest soft ground. We have 9 cross passages that have to be excavated. Willow Avenue, we're close enough to the pile supports for that viaduct. We do see that there will be need to do some underpinning of that structure. So where we are relative to the river bottom, this is our alignment superimposed on part of the NOAA navigation chart for the river. The numbers you can see are the soundings to the river bottom, and you can also see between the blue dashed lines the main navigation channel, wing channels on either side. And because we are grade limited for efficient operation of trains at 2%, In order for us to get to the level we need to get into Penn Station, we do have a section on the Manhattan side, which we refer to as our low cover area, where the amount of cover gets down in the range of about a half a tunnel diameter. So we've identified a zone here several hundred feet in length that's going to require ground improvement in order to provide permanent stabilization of that ground through which the tunnel is going to pass. We are limited as far as, you might say, well, why can't you just add material to the river bottom? The Corps of Engineers, who is responsible for navigation, has set minimum depths for the channels. The main channel is the minimum depth of 45 feet. The wing channels are at 40. So there's limitations on what you can do here. So here we are coming into Manhattan. We get into Manhattan. As I said, our shaft is just on the east side of 12th Avenue. We're passing underneath the Hudson River Corridor Park. And then we have 12th Avenue. This particular area, the ground conditions are not great. I mean, historically, this is an area which was created by the placement of fill. From an engineering standpoint, the soils are not great. They're poor quality. So our 30% design has contemplated the need to do ground improvement in this 300-foot-long segment to get us from the bulkhead over to the shaft. And our assumption, it would be some combination of ground freezing and grouting. This is a cross-section through the Manhattan Bulkhead, a historic structure built in the late 19th century. And given where we have to be elevation-wise, unfortunately, we have to pass through the base of this. It's a masonry block structure with rock fill that sits on timber piles and with riprap on either side. And our tunnel depth, the crown is about 40-some feet, between 40 and 45 feet above the ground surface there. So continuing on into Manhattan, we have the last segment of our project in orange there, joining up with what John had mentioned is Section 3 of the concrete casing project, and that's about 250 feet in length. The tunnel boring machines we're assuming would be demobilized from the shaft here at 12th Avenue, similar to the Hoboken shaft, about 125 feet in diameter, not quite as deep, about 90 feet deep. So the section of tunnel from the east side of the shaft to the north edge of 30th Street has to pass under a fairly large combination sewer, which is about 100 years old. We're looking to do that with tunneling by the sequential excavation method. Again, like the segment to the west, there will be a requirement for some ground improvement. Now, it's one of the issues that we looked at in the design is whether, in fact, you could run the tunnel boring machine straight in all the way from under the river through the bottom of the bulkhead and then right underneath the park in 12th Avenue into the shaft. There are essentially risks in doing that. Our working assumption right now is that there would be a need to do some advanced tunnel segments extending west from the shaft out to the bulkhead to stabilize that ground ahead of time, backfill it, and then you'd be able to bring the tunnel boring machines in with no problem. There is a second sewer that runs north-south under the northern side of 12th Avenue. That is on piles as well. That's going to require underpinning. Let's go back. Okay, so the last part of our project is over beyond the completed sections of the concrete casing. We do have a cut and cover section across 10th Avenue, and then the alignment passes under what's known as the 450 West 33rd Street building, which sits above Amtrak's existing A yard between 10th Avenue and Dyer Avenue. Our third ventilation facility would be built underneath the bottom of this building, between the base of the building and the tracks. So this is what it looks like there. So our new tunnels would come in through the retaining wall that's at the far left side of the photograph. The tunnel that's lit up in the middle is the Empire Line Tunnel, and then we have the main operating tunnels now coming in from New Jersey with a train there on the right-hand side of the picture. So our fan plant will be built above the trains and underneath the base of the building. And, of course, we have to reconfigure the tracks. We have our two new tracks, track 1A and 4A, coming in, as you can see, at the bottom. And we have an extension to the I-ladder track, which allows trains to be distributed to the various tracks coming into the platforms at Penn Station. That has to be reconfigured. And track 2, which connects with Amtrak's Empire Line, that has to be reprofiled. So we've got 9 columns that support the building, which are going to end up being in the way, so they have to be moved so that they're clear of the new track network. So we've got a little underpinning work involved as well, and we've been talking to the owner of the building about that. They're clearly very concerned about this part of the project, and they've told us, we don't just want anybody doing this work. We want somebody who really knows how to do this well. Okay, I wanted to spend at the end here some time talking about contract components, how we've kind of organized the project into what I call the building blocks. Now, these aren't necessarily individual contracts, and we're looking for input from all the really smart people in this room about how best to combine these blocks, so to speak, into construction contracts. But we wanted to just explain this to give you a sense of how we've organized the job and the terminology that we've been using on the project. So we have the C01 component, which consists of all of the surface work in New Jersey, starting, as I said, at County Road in Secaucus, and coming all the way over to Tonnelle Avenue. The Tonnelle Avenue section, a small piece, something that might work well as a little bit of advanced work, considering that it was also a first piece of construction that was done during ARC. We have that designated as component C02, essentially a New Jersey DOT highway project. Next, we have the excavation of the Palisades Tunnel. We refer to that as component C03. So you'd have the primary excavation and also the creation of the approach, the tunnel portal, and the 6 cross passages. Followed by component 4, which would be the internal concrete for the tunnels, the benches, the drainage, all the conduit that would have to go in there, and also the portal building at the Palisades portal in North Bergen. Next, we have component C05, the Hudson River tunnels, which would include the Hoboken shaft excavation, the ground improvement that I mentioned, the low cover area. We have 9 cross passages in this segment, and then the underpinning of the Willow Avenue Bridge in the New Jersey waterfront area. 6 is the internal concrete for those Hudson River tunnels, and also, again, the benches, the conduits, the drainage, the ventilation duct wall. We have the Hoboken fan plant building, all of the internal concrete in that ventilation shaft, and the track work from Hoboken shaft to the 12th Avenue shaft. And I forgot to mentioned for the Palisades section, that would also include the track work from the Palisades portal to Hoboken. Okay, then we have component C07, the Manhattan Underground work. So we have the 12th Avenue shaft. We have the advanced tunneling that I mentioned going west from the shaft to the bulkhead, the ground improvement there. We have the tunnel segment from the east side of the shaft to the north edge of 30th Street, the utility work with the sewers. And that would be followed by component 8, which includes the Manhattan fan plant building, the MEP for the building itself, the track work that would extend from the Manhattan shaft and actually through the existing concrete casings that have been built already in the Section 3 that needs to be built all the way over to 10th Avenue. Then we have 9 here. 9 is all the railroad systems, traction power, signaling, communications, SCADA control for the fan plants, anything to do with security, that sort of thing. Now, we have showing track work for the surface alignment. The systems would also include not only the systems work in the tunnels, but also for the surface section as well. We've had a bit of a debate as to whether the track work for the surface section should go with this, or maybe it would be best to include it in the component C01. Again, that's something that we're looking for input on. And then the last construction component is, sorry, 2 more. Number 10, which is actually the outfitting of the fan plants, all 3 fan plants with the fans and the substation power emergency generators. So that those facilities which apply directly to the ventilation system. Component 11 has to do with the work over underneath 10th Avenue, that cut and cover segment breaking into that area underneath the building at 450 West 33rd Street. The underpinning of those columns that I mentioned had to be moved. The track work from 10th Avenue and tying into the existing A-yard, and the actual construction of that fan plant platform underneath the building. And at the very end here, we have 2 components referred to as 12 and 13. This is for railroad force account support. So these are not like construction contracts, but identification activities where the railroad has to be there for flagging support and for tying in the new systems, the signals, the communication systems, the traction power to the existing northeast corridor. And so we have 2 components, one for work that will be along the northeast corridor in New Jersey, and the other for all the work in New York in the vicinity of A-yard. So that brings me to the end of my technical overview here, and I think now, John, we're going to have an opportunity for some Q&A.
Yes.
Thank you.
Just before we start the Q&A, just a couple of points. Firstly, I wanted to make some introductions up front, just to be clear that obviously there's GDC, and GDC has certainly got several project partners, as John referred to before. And up here today, we've got Marie Corrado from Amtrak, RJ Palladino from New Jersey Transit, and Ken Babetsky from the Port Authority. As well as Phil and John and myself. Secondly, just to make the point, if we don't get to your question today, you will have the opportunity to submit questions as well through the Gateway website, where the live stream is also on at the moment, and we'll do our best to respond to all those questions as well. And then the third point, there will be a microphone going around. I'll also mention that we'll for our press visitors today, there will be a dedicated session for press after the presentations are completed. I think with that we'll move on to Q&A.
Questions?
Yes, please.
Have you prepared any type of a preliminary schedule that you make available to us?
Do you want me to do it? Currently, no. For schedule, we are not putting we have not completed an up-to-date schedule, because clearly, as you'll see when we get into the commercial aspects of the presentation, we obviously have a number of moving parts right now. We are including obviously funding from federal and local sources. I think that is obviously one of our critical items in determining the overall schedule. So we're not releasing one as part of this presentation.
But just to be clear on that, as Frank mentioned, there is a notional schedule that we have. It's really linked to completion of the financial portion of the project, and that's the pacing item at this point.
Any other questions? Here in the front. Oh, sorry, Petra. Yes, right here.
Will this project be constructed under a project labor agreement?
We have not actually had that discussion at this point. I would say that if you look at the history of major projects in the New York, New Jersey metro area, they have been used, project labor agreements have been used for the purposes for which a PLA is helpful, guaranteed availability of labor and no work stoppages. So while that's not a formal part of the process at this point, I think looking at the construction schedule and the trades involved, it certainly lends itself to a PLA.
And I'll just add on that one, actually in the RFI document itself, that is actually one of our express questions, is to get market feedback on the process for a PLA. Sorry, Petra.
How does the construction of the concrete casing phase 3 fit into the packages that you delineated?
It's actually separate from those components that I was talking about. It's been designed in advance of our work on the 30% preliminary design. It's actually at the 100% level. It's essentially ready to go. Again, dependent on funding, but it's not part of what we presented here for the Hudson Tunnel Project.
As Phil mentioned, the last piece of the tunnel box, number 3, can proceed independently. I would also point out that we do have both local and some federal funding in hand, and so part of the current discussion is what will constitute a potential early works package. That could be part of it.
Any other? Down the front here. Just wait for the microphone. Thank you.
How would you describe the allocation of responsibility between the Gateway Development Corporation and the major players that have sponsored it?
It's a great question. First of all, the Gateway Development Corporation is composed of the major players here. So the 2 states, New Jersey and New York, and the 3 public entities, the Port Authority, New Jersey Transit, and Amtrak, are all represented in Gateway Development Corporation. It was set up to actually be a combined vehicle for these institutions together to build the project. As I mentioned in my presentation, for the tunnel at this point, the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey is the project sponsor for NEPA purposes. We're doing that because it's an eligible agency and it's convenient. The intention is that as Gateway Development Corporation has the enabling legislation to be able to assume those responsibilities, it will do so. We anticipate that the contracts would actually be held by Gateway.
At this point, do you have any preference for the contract packaging in terms of the rail systems versus the tunnel, keeping the rail systems with the tunnel or keeping the tunnel separate?
Right now, we are favoring keeping the rail systems separate from the tunneling work.
Any further questions? Yes, please. Actually, we'll just get a microphone to you.
With regards to the Portal Bridge portion of the project, do you envision that being a single contract, or is it going to be broken up into several contracts similar to the way Secaucus Junction was built?
Please.
That my mic will go on first. The risk assessment that was done with the FTA for the Portal North Bridge recommended one single package, and that's what we contemplate doing at this time. That'll be a New Jersey Transit procurement in mid-2019.
Any further questions? Okay. Thank you.
It's my pleasure now to actually introduce the second of our three trustees for Gateway Development Corporation, representing the state of New Jersey, Jerry Zarro. Jerry?
Well, thank you, John, and thank you to Phil, I think, because I'd like to say that was a wonderful and clear presentation of what is contemplated. I'd also, on behalf of GDC, like to thank you all for being here this morning. It is not lost on us the level of talent and expertise that's present in this room today, and actually our supplemental rooms as we were overflowing today. Nor are we unaware of the level of professional excitement and enthusiasm that Gateway is generating in the infrastructure community. We at GDC share that energy and vision, and we are absolutely committed to making Gateway a reality. After all, we have no choice in this matter, as Gateway is the #1 infrastructure project in the United States, and for good reason. The tunnel carries 24 trains every hour, 200,000 commuters every day. At least 10 and perhaps 20% of our nation's GDP is dependent upon those slender tubes. Failure of the tunnel, therefore, whether mechanical or unthinkably catastrophic, would lead to an inability to get to work for hundreds of thousands of commuters, the loss of jobs, and consequent regional economic dislocation, and a following decline in real estate values, both commercial and residential. And the spillover effects from that would not end there. A surge in bus and automobile traffic would necessarily result, which would already add to our clogged roadways as sure as day follows night. That in turn would choke off our red-hot industry that we now have as the last mile in the supply chain because of our great roadway network, which now would become congested, clogged, and gridlocked. The 21,000 daily Amtrak users might have to resort to already congested and clogged air travel and add to great expense. In short, all of this would lead to an enormous psychological toll and disruption and stress upon the citizens of this region, all of which would be intolerable. And so, as I say, failure is not an option. Now, as has been discussed, the elephant in the room, of course, is funding. Any project of this magnitude must have a federal component to it. We have applied and we have complied with all federal requirements to be eligible for this funding. But at the moment, the reality is Gateway is a political hostage. And in the vernacular of the day, it's sad. While the administration claims that the use of federal loans repayable solely with state funds is not local share or skin in the game, that position is factually and legally incorrect. It is also without historical precedent, as federal loans repayable with state funds have always been considered local share. And as any homeowner in this room with a mortgage knows all too well, a loan payable is, in fact, skin in the game. But rest assured of this, we are moving ahead with Gateway and with confidence. At the direction and initiative of Governor Phil Murphy, New Jersey is investing $600 million of local money to fund the Portal North Bridge. We, together with our friends in New York, led by Governor Cuomo and Chairman Cohn, who was with you this morning, and at Amtrak by Vice Chairman Kosha, are committed to doing whatever is absolutely necessary in continuing to work for federal funding, in value engineering the Gateway project to reduce cost, in finding additional local funding sources, and in exploring private sector financing. And with the help of your vision, your knowledge, and your input in meetings such as today, we will make Gateway a reality. Thank you all for your participation and, more importantly, for your interest. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Trustee Zarro. We are going to take a 15-minute break. I would point out that there are refreshments in the first room down here, restrooms down the hall to the right near the elevator core. We will reconvene at 10:20. We will, at which point we'll have a discussion of the regional partnership and the commercial presentation by Frank. Thanks. Well, once again, people, thank you all for attending today. We're going to kick off the second part of this morning's presentations with two of our regional partners. As I mentioned, the states of New Jersey and New York and the three agencies, Amtrak, Port Authority of New York and New Jersey, and New Jersey Transit, are the gateway partners together building it. We'd like to start by introducing our key representatives from our two state partners, Mary Maples, who's the Deputy Chief Counsel for Governor Murphy in New Jersey, and Peter Kiernan, who's the Special Counselor for Infrastructure Initiatives for Governor Cuomo. So, Mary, come on up.
Thank you, John. Good morning, everyone. I hope you've had an informative time here today so far. As John said, my name is Mary Maples. I'm Deputy Chief Counsel to Governor Murphy. And, I hope by the end of today, the main goal is so that you feel the energy and the excitement we all have for this program. It's critical, it's essential, and it's one that we fully support. From the moment Governor Murphy took office, he made clear that transportation infrastructure is key to the success of the region, and the Gateway program is a key part of that. The replacement of the Portal North Bridge, the building of a new Hudson Tunnel, they're projects of significant magnitude that must move forward, especially when you understand the impact of failure of these assets. I know you've heard a lot about that today, and it can't be overstated. In the few short months we've been in office, New Jersey has shown our commitment to these projects through our commitment to fund the local share of the Portal North Bridge. We're using funds generated entirely within the state's resources. And let me be very clear. We're talking about $600 million of New Jersey skin in this game. We're not going anywhere, and we are moving this project forward. It's ready to go. We're ready to launch. And in fact, certain early work has already begun. If you haven't yet met Kevin Corbett from New Jersey Transit, he will be probably the first to talk to you about the over 700 borings we've done into the ground. So we know exactly what we're building and where we're building it. And we just are waiting for our federal partners to meet us halfway so we can get more than a few shovels in the ground. We anxiously await that and are also focused on the Hudson Tunnel Project. It's very exciting. Burrowing under the Hudson River is no small undertaking. This is historic. And that's why you're all here. We want your ideas, we want your big thoughts, we want your big ideas, and challenge you to bring those forward at this point. We all know and appreciate how Superstorm Sandy damaged the existing tunnel. Combined with our obligation to plan for the future, there's no doubt that these tunnels will be a part of that vision. Governor Murphy and Governor Cuomo have full confidence in the teams you've heard from today. New Jersey Transit, the Port Authority, Amtrak, and the GDC will collectively deliver these goals. It's not just the executives that are interested in this project. Our congressional delegations are doing their part as well. We would not have gotten this far without the leadership of Chairman Frelinghuysen, Senators Booker and Menendez, and our partners across the river, including Senator Schumer. This is not a New Jersey issue. This is not a New York issue. This is not even a Northeast issue. It doesn't matter whether you root for the Yankees or the Mets or the Red Sox, but you should all root for the Yankees. The impact of these pinch points along the Northeast corridor makes this a nationwide issue. I want to thank you for coming out today. I do want to say once again, I challenge you to bring your big ideas. That's what we're here for. That's what we want to see. And on behalf of Governor Murphy, I know and hope and look forward to hearing from you again soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. And just to underscore one of the things that Mary said, for the Portal North Bridge, the local component is 100% in place, 100% funded through the New Jersey Economic Development Authority. And I would add, at considerable opportunity cost for New Jersey, they've made this a priority, and we very much appreciate it. On the New York side of the river, let me introduce Peter Kiernan, again, Special Counselor for Infrastructure Initiatives. And Governor Cuomo has been a strong supporter of this project from the beginning. Peter is one of the people that day after day is making this project happen. Peter?
Thank you, John. Peter Kiernan, I'll be very brief. Transportation is the servant of economics. It's seldom the reverse. And that principle is manifested in Governor Cuomo's $100 billion infrastructure program for New York State. It's exemplified by the Tappan Zee Bridge project, a $4 billion project that links the economies of metropolitan New York with upstate New York. It's demonstrated in the commitment to Moynihan Station and the investments that are being made and will be made in Penn Station, so that we will have first-class intercity terminals and intracity terminals. It's further demonstrated in the commitments of the state and support of the Port Authority's efforts to refurbish and revitalize Kennedy Airport and LaGuardia Airport and regional airports around the state where there is a lot of investment. In the Long Island Railroad, there is currently underway a $6 billion investment program that relates to what's known as the double track program and the third track program, as well as 20 stations being significantly enhanced, because servitude of transportation to economics creates economic opportunity, and those Long Island Railroad projects will fuel the continued growth of Long Island. There is also investments, massive investments in the Metropolitan Transportation Authority. Tough to see the results there, but the investments are being made. But there isn't a project that exemplifies the axiom of transportation serving economics than the Gateway Project. It's literally a lifeline to the densest population area of the United States. Governor Cuomo and former Governor Christie in 2017 announced their support, along with the Port Authority, to pay for 50% of the construction costs. The governors, Governor Murphy and Governor Cuomo, have reiterated that commitment, and I'm here today to repeat it with emphasis. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. And Mary and Peter, again, we very much appreciate the strong, enduring commitment by both governors in both states. Projects happen when leadership is committed to them, and we have that in both cases, so thank you. The next portion and next presentation is the Gateway Development Corporation Finance Director, Frank Saker, on the commercial update, the RFI process, and we'll have a Q&A related to that as well. So, Frank?
Thank you, John. Good morning, everyone. My bearings here. Good. Hi, it's good to see everybody here today, and what a familiar faces, and hope we can give you a bit of an update here. I wanted to start with just a general background on the Hudson Tunnel Project financial plan, and we're going to focus on the Hudson River Tunnel and the concrete casing, in particular the tunnel. These are the most time-sensitive elements, and you've heard our own 3 Rs, if you like, the resiliency, redundancy, and reliability, and that's what we're looking to achieve with this new construction program. You'll see a reference up there to a construction cost, $11.1 billion, which is what we've used for our submittal so far, and that is based on the 10% design that was completed last year. And submitted in our December 2017 submittal for our FTA grant. What Phil Rice was describing earlier is now close to the 30% design. So we've made a lot of progress over the last sort of 6 to 9 months. Up there, we'll mention, as Mary and Peter mentioned before, the local commitments have been made so far. Of that 11.1 billion, 50% has been committed, and recommitted by the local partners. And you'll see the numbers there, 1.9 billion from New Jersey Transit, 1.9 from the Port Authority, and 1.75 from the State of New York. Total 5.55 billion, or 50%. Some adjustments within those numbers reflecting, as Mary mentioned, the additional contributions that New Jersey has made to Portal North Bridge will be reflected in terms of adjustments here, but between the port and New Jersey Transit, but still adding up to $5.55 billion. I think it's important, what are those commitments in terms of what do they look like? These are funding streams. So the idea is that these will be funding streams from these three entities to support the GDC debt obligations, and will be net proceed amounts. For the another large part of the project is the rehabilitation of the North River Tunnel. I think we've given you lots of photos of how ordinary it is right now, and obviously how important it is to replace that tunnel, but also to rehab the existing tunnel. That is a part of the project that can't start obviously until we get to substantial completion on the new tunnel, so that we have that redundancy that we are looking for. So hence we are in the process of still working to identify the local source for that component of the project. I think I also want to make a point that those amounts, along with the commitments that Amtrak has made to the project so far, is what's actually paying for the development costs of the project. So everything you're seeing in terms of the work that Phil's done, the work that we're doing here, GDC has a development budget, and these amounts are being used to help fund those amounts. So that really our goal is to make sure that we are establishing and setting up GDC and a potential procurement program, so that when the funding, when we do determine the funding mix, that we are ready to go really as quickly as possible. Okay, I know you'd be disappointed if I didn't bring a chart. Now, in some ways, yes, there's a lot on this chart. In other ways, there's not enough yet, as you'll hear me say as we go through this. If you bear with me, what I want to do is actually walk through really what is GDC, how does GDC fit into the mix so far, and where so far is the money coming from, where is it going to? Really, I think the first point I want to make is this: clearly not final. These, as I said in the title, these are our building blocks. Phil mentioned the phrase before, and that's really where we are at this point. These are the building blocks that can inform the structures that we may arrive at. Really, no procurement decisions have been taken so far. That's the purpose of what we're doing here, and the information we're looking to gather from the market. I just wanted to show sort of really how the cash is moving. It's not a legal structure. Clearly, whatever the rules and wherever our funding is coming from, ultimately we will make sure that we are complying with the specific technical requirements that we have to, whether from a federal or local or certainly private perspective. So let's start in the middle. GDC. So really, GDC's perform and can perform a number of roles here. We are contemplating that it could become be the development company for the procurement of the infrastructure, and/or it could be a grantor of a concession or multiple concessions for the project, depending on which, whether it's a P3 or what flavour of P3 we may determine. The idea is that it can perform multiple roles. And I should say up at the front, this, as you can see from Phil's earlier slides with the multiple contracts that we have there, this is not just one single project. There's multiple projects and multiple opportunities here, and we are determining sort of there may not be a one-size-fits-all in terms of procurement method, and we may have different procurement methods along the way. I did want to make the point that GDC, or perhaps a future incarnation of GDC, as we go through the grant eligibility process, the idea will be the grant recipient. Clearly, it's not able to do that today, and hence, the Port Authority is performing that role of project sponsor until GDC is able to perform the role itself. If we move over to the actually above the box, so I just want to spend briefly. We've talked already about the project partners. So these are the folks that, if you like, are responsible for controlling GDC. GDC is a New Jersey non-profit organisation. You've met Chairman Cohen, the New York representative, earlier. Jerry Zarrow, the New Jersey representative, and then the Amtrak representative and the vice chairman of GDC is Tony Kosher. Onto the left-hand side of the diagram. So the red boxes. These are the, if you like, the federal component, our anticipated federal component of the project, and in some combination of Amtrak FTA contributions and FTA grants. And that will be funding that's made available to, when it's agreed, to be able to be provided to GDC, assuming it's the project sponsor, to pay for the construction of the new project. I have a yellow box there, and I'll mention this as we talk about some of the RFI issues that we were looking for feedback on for tunnel ancillary revenue. Don't know what that's going to be. Don't know what it's going to look like. That's, as Mary said, we're looking for big ideas, and that's one of the bigger ones. In terms of, clearly we're looking to build a very, it's going to be a high availability, high reliability conduit under the Hudson River. And we're open to ideas on how to, obviously, apart from its prime role of a transportation conduit, of how else we may be able to utilise that conduit. The green boxes. The green boxes, what I've done, and I've mentioned this already in terms of the cash flow streams coming from the local partners, and it marries up with the green box on the right-hand side handling. So again, right now we're assuming RIF loans coming into GDC on from the right-hand side, and that's being serviced by the payment streams coming in from the different local partners on the left-hand side. And again, what the final combination mix of those local shares will be, was obviously we're working on that, but that's the principle, if you like, is that there'll be payment streams coming into GDC from the local partners, helping GDC to service its debt. Bear with me, we're almost there. Bottom right side. So the grey boxes. So this, if you like, is the procurement side of it, and really, the goal of whatever procurement or procurements that we determine is to come up with the best value for money for GDC and its project partners over the life of the asset. And you'll hear me make that point a few times. Not just building it, but how do we make sure we build and maintain an asset over its life, offering the best value for money for GDC and its partners. Within that, obviously there's several components. Design and construction. Now, I'll reiterate that no procurement decisions have been made, and no decisions have been made on what, if you like, whether there's a flavour of P3 here, what acronym we may wish to consider, DB, design build, design bid build, design build finance maintain, design bid maintain. You all know as many as I do. They're all on the table, and that's certainly we'll take everybody's feedback from that under the RFI process, and then we will help I think determine what is going to give the best value for money for the project and for GDC and its partners. So our minds are open there, and again I'll reiterate there may be more than one answer depending on what part of the project it is. I'll mention the O&M. Certainly it's anticipated that Amtrak and New Jersey Transit will continue to operate and maintain their train systems, and no changes is considered there. But as part of that, I do want to mention the life cycle maintenance, basically, if you like, the heavy major maintenance of the civil works. We are building a lot of civil works. And it is an open question as to how best to maintain those, and whether the users of the tunnel should be maintaining those the new civil works, or whether that should form part of whether the same contract or an existing contract for the maintenance of the civil works. Again, we're very focused on making sure we've got a good alignment of interests between the folks who are building the tunnel and then the ongoing long-term maintenance, life cycle maintenance of the tunnel. I'll move on. So we've already talked about this a little bit in terms of the purpose of the RFI. This phase of the RFI is to gather additional feedback. You'll see already the booklet's out on the website. For those who read and replied to the RFI, first phase of the RFI last fall, first, thank you. Secondly, I think you'll see this time our questions are much more targeted and I guess precise in terms of reflecting the work we've been doing over the last more or less year now, and also the fact that we've advanced the design now from 10% to 30%. I think the idea is that we will use this RFI information and in the one-on-one information that we get, meetings that we have after receiving responses, to really help inform what I call the three legs of the stool, if you like, of procurement in terms of risk allocation, where we've been doing a lot of work on that over the past several months. Contract packaging, again, you saw Phil's slides earlier on that score, and then procurement methods. And certainly, being a project finance geek, certainly I do follow them sequentially, but I think they all do inform each other. We'll mention this at the end again as well, but just as a reminder, we're looking for responses back on August 21st. And I want to be clear that if you respond to the RFI, clearly no one's precluded from participating in future procurements by responding to the RFI. I just want to make that clear. We'll also ask you to identify in your RFI response if you would like to have a one-on-one with us. And certainly, as I said, we're definitely in a information gathering mode through this RFI process, and we are open to meet with as many folk as wish to meet with us. So I want to spend an additional second or two giving a little bit more background on the RFI. I found, sitting in my previous life, this was always trying to figure out why are people asking the questions that they're asking. And so we thought these couple of slides, really obviously not a replacement or official addition to the RFI, but certainly we want to give some information to try to help you form your responses back to us. Firstly, on the early works, I think John mentioned briefly before that we do anticipate, and we're seeing already that there could be potential funding available for early works. And part of what we're trying to determine is how can we most beneficially deploy any funding that we have available for early works in terms of progressing the project, helping to keep the project on a schedule. And effectively de-risking the project as much as we can, so getting the maximum bang for our buck for early work. In the next breath, I'll say, and again, we're also conscious that we do want to make sure that we're giving a lot of wrong transport mode, but I mentioned a lot of runway, if you like, for the market to come up with their best innovations and their best ideas. And so we're also conscious about where's the right balance in terms of early work that we do that does not also, if you like, step on the shoes of the market in terms of stifling any innovation that they may bring. And there is a balance there, and I think I've got a specific question on that in the RFI process and in the RFI booklet, and certainly welcome feedback on that. Civil works maintenance. Actually, I mentioned this briefly earlier that clearly there's substantial civil works that we're looking to maintain. And we think this is a big strategic question for us in terms of delivering the best value for money to GDC and its project partners. And certainly we'll be asking a lot of market feedback on this particular question, including impacts on obviously what form of procurement method, but also impacts on the, if you like, the competitiveness of the procurement in terms of if we package any maintenance with a construction contract or not. And again, no decision's been made, but we wanted to put it out there and actually get the market's feedback on what the preferences might be. And I've mentioned, and clearly, obviously, we're doing this because we want to make sure we've got a good alignment of interest between the folks building and the folks using and owning the tunnel. Ancillary revenue. I mentioned we've got this very reliable conduit that's going to be built under the Hudson River. No one's putting an anchor through our tunnel and pulling up any cables. So we're open to ancillary revenue opportunities that clearly don't interfere with our primary purpose, which is rail transport. So we're open and certainly seeking feedback on what should be the right model for us to encourage and entertain different ancillary revenue ideas. Welcome feedback on that. What do I mean by that? Should they be like fixed payments that are made? Should it be a revenue sharing arrangement? I think our minds are open as to what it might constitute, but certainly we think there's value there, and we're certainly interested in the best ways to take advantage of that. I think I'd also make the point that as part of that, from a logistical question, is to sort of how do we make sure that we don't preclude those revenue ideas through our procurement method, whether they should form part of the procurement, whether they should be a separate procurement. How do we make sure that our design does not preclude, or your design does not preclude the future revenue opportunities? They're the sorts of things that we're looking for feedback on as we go through this process. There's obviously we've got several questions in the RFI and topics concerning procurement. As you hear me say time and again, people are bored with me saying it in terms of we will run a procurement that's going to deliver the best value for money for GDC and its project partners. I've identified up there the priorities that we have been contemplating in terms of that will inform the procurement. I did put the caveat right up there up front in no particular order because we haven't done that sort of analysis yet. But certainly, we're spending a lot of time on what is the optimal allocation of risk. We want to make sure we're obviously allocating as much risk as we can afford to, but affordability is also a key issue for us. Reduction in cost, affordability. It's something we focus on every day. So my previous boxes, I've got boxes I've got to find more dollars for. Affordability is a key issue for us, and certainly in the RFI responses, feedback on ways to make the project more affordable are certainly welcome and welcomed and encouraged. Completion date, expedited completion. Again, our 3 Rs are very, very important to us. And for those of you who live in the New York area, who may use the tunnel, I think reliability is a key issue. And the faster we can get this tunnel built, the faster we can deliver on making it a more reliable commute for the residents of New York and New Jersey, and those using the tunnel on the Northeast Corridor. Certainty of schedule and certainty of cost. Clearly, I don't have any deep pockets at the end of the day. I need to know what the project will cost and when it's going to be delivered, and that's something that certainly, as you expect, that we're going to be spending a lot of time focused on. Again, Phil's given a 30% design presentation where we've got to. We will be very clear in our procurement process that we are encouraging innovation in design and construction methods. And part of that links to affordability, also to completion dates. But we our minds are open as to what is the best way to build this. And if you have any takeaways today, that's a key one. Is that certainly we deliberately set this day up to make sure we're giving as good information as we can give to make sure that we get good information back through the RFI process. I do want to make a mention about creditworthy bids. Again, as a former banker, you'd be disappointed if I didn't. But clearly, we anticipate asking through our procurement methods, folks are going to be taking on substantial obligations. Having the creditworthiness to support those obligations is going to be an important factor for us in our analysis. So they're the sorts of things. I don't think there's any surprises up there. I think certainly they're the sort of things that we are considering. They will inform the evaluation analysis that we end up doing, and as we figure what the ranking of those are. But certainly they're the things that we spending our time on. I think I'd also mention as part of the procurement, you'll see a couple of questions that we've got in there about lessons learned. One thing we know is we don't know it all. And certainly myself and my colleagues doing a lot of work in terms of looking at different procurements in the United States and around the world for projects of this size and magnitude. And we are looking for feedback in terms of what you all have seen that, not just in the US but globally, what's worked, what perhaps hasn't worked. Certainly asking for feedback on that so we can make sure we can design our procurement with those in mind. I want to spend a second on geotech. In terms of the geotech risk allocations, clearly one of the key, you can see it from Phil's slides earlier, one of the key focuses of us from a risk allocation perspective. We are looking to, again, allocate the geotech risk in the way that's going to be most affordable, but also offer the best value for money. And certainly getting feedback on ways that we can do that is certainly a key focus of the RFI. We do intend, when we ultimately get to procurement, that there's work being done, there's a lot of borings being done, to have a geotech baseline report. In addition, we have contemplating that we'll be giving opportunity for folks to request additional borings as well. Again, there are examples of that in the United States and around the world where that's been done. Getting feedback from folks on that, on what different methods and what they preferred, what they didn't prefer, I think is certainly welcome as we go through this process. And then finally, contracting. I did want to mention this. Again, Phil put up those couple of slides with sort of all the component parts that we've been considering. We are looking to package up. Our minds are open on what's the best way to package those contracts. Really, there's a balance between two competing goals there. One, obviously, maximising competition, because we do see that as a way to help on the affordability front. But secondly, and again, as a project finance geek, interface risk is a key factor for us. We've seen other projects around the world who've run into interface challenges where there've been too many packages. And again, back to my deep pocket point earlier, I don't have the deep pockets, so we're very focused on making sure we're minimising risks where we can. And so that's a balance that we're going to need to strike, and getting your feedback on that is going to be important. I will make one point to make our lives easier as we go forward. The numbering system that Phil's used in his slides, which will be up on the website by this afternoon. To the extent you are giving us feedback, to the extent you can refer to the numbering system that Phil's used, that would be very gratefully received by us. Thank you. Good. So. In the RFI, I think certainly responses, it's out there, it's on the website. The responses are due August 21st. We are looking to do have one-on-one meetings. As I said, please nominate in your response if you would like to have a one-on-one meeting with us. We're looking to do those during the fall of this year. I think depending how many responses back will determine the precise timing of when we do it. I think overall, I can't say enough that this is your opportunity to help inform the procurement. And it's your opportunity to really give us the best ideas and the best suggestions that you have based on really the global experience that exists in this room. We want to make sure, I think some of you have heard me say several times, we will run a world-class procurement for this tunnel. And I think I want to make sure that it is reflecting all the experiences that obviously my GDC partners have, but also that we receive from the private sector as well. With that, I think I'll say thank you, and we'll offer any question, Q&A.
Questions?
Actually, if we wait for the microphone.
We'll bring the mic around.
Yeah, pretty easy question. Is all the information that's available on Gateway out on the website? For instance, any geotech information, any design information, is that where we would go to see everything that's available?
I think for right now, thank you. For right now, everything that's available is on the Gateway. There's the Gateway website, and there is obviously the EIS, the draft EIS from earlier in the year as well. I think that's the extent of information that we have available right now. Yep.
A couple of people back here.
Thank you for a great presentation. I was wondering if you could comment on last year's RFI responses, sort of an overview of what was the market feedback you received and how it's helped you sort of refine shaping the project and inform the RFI that's out now?
Sure, thank you. I think the RFI process that we ran last year was very helpful. One, we got, I think it was over 3 dozen responses to that RFI stage. The questions, if you recall, were more general in scope, whereas I think this time we've become a little more, again, reflecting more advanced, that we're a bit more focused this time around. But really, a lot of the questions that we got, one of the responses we got back, really reflected the if you like, the motivations of the different respondents. So, contractors certainly had a view. Infrastructure funds had other suggestions, and then more industrial players, again, different views. But I think overall, I think the feedback that we got was there was a general huge amount of appetite, which is one of the reasons I'm not so surprised by the presence today, to be involved in the project. I think, again, I would say that no shortage of capital. It was clear there was no shortage of capital available for this project. I've made that point publicly and privately. The question is, obviously, I've got to pay it all back. So that's where we spend a lot of our focus. But overall, I think the takeaways were that it was a very enthusiastic and encouraging response that we got back. And we used a lot of the information that we got in terms of, for example, risk allocation. Lots of folks had views on, again, very big picture risk allocation, which we've been really working away on the last several months, and is really the resulted in some of the follow-up questions that we're asking this time around. That's probably as far as I'd go. Thanks.
Thank you. I think a lot of people in this room have worked for most of the partners here, Port Authority, Amtrak, New Jersey Transit, but I don't think anybody's worked for the Gateway Development Corporation. You've had some discussion about risk allocation and packaging and competitiveness and geotechnical information, but to put it in my question in a nutshell, I think everyone in this room would be very disappointed if, for example, there was no differing site condition clause in the contract. So my question is there going to be some roundtable discussion or feedback or early action item to share maybe a draft of what general terms and conditions would look like on any of these contracts?
I think what I'd say is that does, again, coming from a first principles perspective, that does get into our procurement methods, which we're determining at the moment, and what is the right procurement method for the project or projects, or procurement methods, plural. And I think depending on what approach we take will depend on really how much time we need to spend in terms of the contractual clauses, if you like. For example, if we go a particular flavour of P3, for example, then we expect to have a form of document that outlines those arrangements in the RFP document. If we look at a different sort of approach, design, bid, build sort of approach, then having agreeing conditions, what those conditions would be an important part of that process. So I can't answer your question directly right now, but it is clear it's on our mind, and it is part of what will inform the procurement method analysis that we're going to do.
On that question, if I can just emphasize that the RFI one-on-one opportunities are your single best opportunity to actually make those points and explain the rationale behind them. So I'd urge everybody to maximize the opportunity through those RFI one-on-ones.
Can you talk about the expected timing to get legislative approval from the two states to become the developer and hold contracts?
That's a process that's under discussion right now. What I would emphasize is that we have two parallel paths, either of which can work. So having identical legislation from both states that enables the Gateway Development Corporation to receive grants, issue debt, and be the contracting agency is one path, and one that the partners see as a preferred path. The history of the Gateway project so far is that we've, through the partner agencies, we've been able to do whatever we need to do. And so for the same logic that has the Port Authority standing in as a project sponsor now would allow the Port Authority or other agencies to continue in that if we don't have it. So no one should leave this discussion today thinking that progress on the Gateway Tunnel is dependent entirely on the legislation. We have two parallel paths, either of which can work. We have a preferred one, but obviously we have three agencies here that have an ability to do that on their own.
Yes. I had a question about the award for the legal services RFPs. Have they been made, and if so, which firms have been selected?
The RFP for legal services has been awarded, and Diana, do you want to? Dwayne Morris was selected. Yeah, that was approved by the board in the March session. At the risk of stating the obvious, we also have an RFP on the street right now for a financial advisor for the tunnel project.
Right, John, if I could, maybe. Just to clarify for the audience, the attorneys that were hired were Gateway Development corporate attorneys, not project counsel, which is a distinctly different thing we have not yet gone out to bid on.
Thank you.
It's New Jersey Council. Yeah. Actually, I should take that point to note. I mentioned before when Phil was speaking in terms of the technical support that we've had from each of the partners, and here again on the commercial side as well. There's a lot of folks who are working every day on Gateway, and here, so Marie Corrado. Actually, Marie, you're in the technical one too. So you're Marie Corrado from Amtrak, William Labenfold from Port Authority, and Ayelet Hirschkorn from New Jersey Transit, the folks I work with every day on these sorts of issues.
My question has a couple of parts. You mentioned that The budget is based on the 10% design, but you also mentioned earlier this morning that you submitted a 30% design to the federal government for review. So why did you update the budget to reflect the 30% design, or did you not? And if not, why not? And are you going to give the industry the opportunity to comment on the 30% design so that you can refine the budget so that we are not all later beaten up about cost overruns on this project?
First, in terms of process, the 30% design has been submitted, as I mentioned earlier, to U.S. Department of Transportation. There's an annual capital improvement grant budget cycle. So as part of that cycle, in the first week of September, we will be updating the financial submission portion of the tunnel. We would welcome everyone's input on the 30% design, and again, the 30% being a logical jumping off point for discussions about procurement methodology. If you have specific questions, technical risks, or any others, the RFI process is a great venue to go through those and discuss those. But again, one of the things that is happening concurrent with this design work is updating the financial plan for the tunnel. We have previously updated it as recently as last month. The formal and full submission will be first week of September.
Earlier, you indicated that now the local commitments have reached almost $6 billion, so that's a lot of money. Is it possible to release some construction packages using those funds even for some of the works?
I should also mention that we do have some federal funding in hand. There's $561 million that has been approved that could be, and I'd underscore, could be used as part of an early works package. What we cannot do is move forward on a project of national significance without a financial commitment on the federal side for the entire project as well. It's not only not prudent in procurement terms, it's not something that we have the ability or the desire to do. The typical sequence is you have a local commitment that then leverages a federal commitment. That's exactly what we've done. And whether you're talking about the Portal North Bridge or the tunnel, what you actually see is 2 states and 3 agencies that have made some very hard decisions to prioritize this project because it is a single point of failure for 10% of America's GDP. And now that we've locked down the local side of it, we're concentrated on the federal partnership side of it as well. If past is prologue and you look at projects throughout the country of regional and national significance to a project, they've had a federal funding component as well. Other questions? If there are no other questions, let me first thank you all for participating today and your interest in this process. I think you've seen from the presentations, the materials that are on the website, this is a multifaceted project that is moving forward actually pretty rapidly. The RFI process, the one-on-one sessions that will go with it, the updated capital improvement grant submission to the federal government are all indications of progress that we're making on the projects. We do feel that we have the strong commitment of both states and all 3 organizations. We are confident that we'll wrap up the rest of it. In terms of what you'll see next beyond the RFI process, again, there's discussions that we're having about early works, just as you see on the Portal North Bridge project, which technically de-risk the project and make the construction itself easier and more predictable, doing something similar on the tunnel side. I do want to underscore the urgency of the project. If anything, it's accelerated. The existing tunnel, while it's safe on a day-to-day basis, we have more and more in the way of technical unknowns as time goes by. And for a 107-year-old tunnel that was carrying passengers while the Titanic was under construction, and while Orville and Wilbur Wright were switching from the Model A to the Model B Flyer, I think it's fair to say that we've gotten the useful life out of the current tunnel that we're going to get. Sequentially, as was pointed out today, we cannot rehabilitate those existing tunnels until the new tunnel is built. And in a nutshell, that's why you see the urgency that we have. And unlike any other aviation project, any other highway project, any other transportation project of any kind in this metropolitan area, there is no substitute facility. There's no other way to get passengers into New York, whether they're traveling from the Midwest, from Florida, or from a local commute. This is a truly unique single point of failure. So the urgency that you see and hear for this project is really driven by the fact that from a generational point of view, we have clearly been living off of the hard work, not of our parents or grandparents, but in this case probably our great-grandparents, and the project moving forward will do the same for the next 3 or 4 generations. So thank you all for coming today. We have food. You're welcome to stay around and discuss and talk informally. We will be, the Gateway and sponsoring agency staff will be here. So thank you for coming, and look forward to working together.